science terms in this one sentence alone that I will then explain.
Yeah.
The autosomal DNA of a 12,500 plus year old infant from Montana was sequenced. So
that's the oldest infant in the world.
It is.
Yeah, I mean, seriously.
Okay, so
after 6 months, you're not an infant, right?
So here's a kind of an explanation of some of that. So autosomal DNA is any of the chromosomes other than sex-determining chromosomes, which are the X and the Y, or the genes of those chromosomes. So these are not sex genes; these are just kind of genes in there that they're discovering to be able to date it with. That particular infant is referred to as ANZIC1.
Okay.
And it was found near several Clovis artifacts.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're postulating from that the two must be tied together, which kind of makes sense. They then did DNA testing and comparisons from Siberian sites, and these would be sites that had, these pre-human, or not pre-human, but prehistoric
human samples.
Yeah,
they had all the human samples, and they ruled out that there were any European, and by that I mean Western European affinities in the DNA. So it showed that then. And then they did more testing, and they showed that currently existing native populations of this country, which would be the Native Americans, their DNA was related to it. And I'm looking for the one. They said that it was derived from an ancient population that lived in Siberia in the upper Paleolithic Malta population. Does Malta sound right? When they put apostrophes in the middle of a word like
that,
that,
get a little confused.
It always messes
I don't
me
know.
up.
That's supposed to be a glottal stop. In other words, not Malta, but Malta. I don't know. But.
You might be right.
Yeah.
But they then took that in sequencing, and they showed that South American and Central American Native American populations were that DNA. So in other words, they were running that chain of events
all the way down.
And this, they say, and this will make sense a little bit later, but they say that proves that the Clovis culture was here, and it couldn't have interbred with a culture that had come from Europe to what is now the Americas.
Yeah.
And
so anyway,
and I have to say that when I say that, what I mean is, if they did encounter other peoples, because this will be important in a little bit, if they encountered other people, basically means they didn't breed with them. They killed them.
Probably.
Or they did something, but no interbreeding happened on any big scale. So that's an important thing to remember for later on.
So this would suggest then that if this Clovis, this baby who was more closely related to Central and South American Indians than to North American Indians, the population we have today, this sort of suggests that the Clovis people maybe didn't so much die out as just move south, and maybe a new more aggressive population pushed in from the north.
They are related to the Indian cultures, the American Indian cultures that were in the eastern seaboard and the northeastern seaboard. But what it seems to indicate, I've seen some graphs of this, or some maps of this, it seems to indicate, to simplify it, that they headed south. They hit what I would guess was somewhere around Texas to Mexico, and one group kept heading south, and the other group headed east. And then they went east, hit the sea, and then began to head north again. So there's a divergence in the gene pool because of that. Now, again, this is very theoretical. I don't understand the gene sequencing and how all of that works.
You don't?
That's what I understand it to me. I mean, it's pretty freaking cool. But
I agree.
That they can figure out that they must have diverged somewhere like that. But farther than that, the science is a bit beyond me.
Yeah, I think it's a bit beyond everybody, because the problem with it is that you're working, even if you're a super expert on this stuff, you're still working with very fragmentary evidence.
Yeah. Well, and here, this will actually bring us into the next thing that we've got for the Clovis theory, which is problems with it. Because if we think that whatever people it was came across the land bridge around 12,000 years ago, that means that in 1,000 years they had managed to head all the way south, populate that whole area, and then spread east into the eastern seaboard of the continental U.S. and then go up, which is a really fast migration.
It is,
in my mind.
Well, yeah, because although there are answers, there are theories that explain that too, right?
Well, there are some theories that explain that.
There's one theory at least.
Yeah, there is. But here's another issue with the Clovis first theory, or the Clovis people theory, is in 1997. There was a bunch of authorities. I'm assuming these are archaeological authorities. I'm not exactly sure who those authorities were, but they inspected Monte Verde, which is in Chile. It's a site in Chile, and that site had signs of human settlement, and it was dated at 14,800 years ago, which is an issue because if these people came across the land bridge somewhere between 13 to 11,000 years ago, then how the heck did they get all the way south 2,000 years earlier? So there's a big issue with that.
I guess part of the problem here is this whole, like, we can only rely on radiocarbon dating so much. We've talked about this on other episodes, and I mean, you know, it's not that it's really flawed, but our ability to date things has to get better sometime.
And the problem with it is it's got a plus minus, and that plus minus can be
huge. Yeah, and it's just, you know, so it's hard to tell with these sort of things where, you know, you say, well, this one was 14,800 years ago, and they wouldn't, that predates these other people by a couple of thousand years. But like, what's the plus or minus on it? You know, is there a sizable overlap there? Is it a little shocking to think that like people could have, you know, settled that much area in that amount of time? Sure, but like, they were prolific. Like, our ancestors were prolific.
And they would have been mobile constantly.
They would have been
not
mobile.
Like us having to pack all our crap.
There was a lot of stuff, right? I mean, like, there was a lot of stuff for them to eat. There was a lot of new stuff for them to hunt and explore. And
a lot of game that wasn't used to human beings and that they could kill quite easily.
Yeah,
so after they hunted an area out, they'd move on. And so, and who knows, maybe they arrived 20,000 years ago. And they had another, like, 5,000, a whole 5,000 years to migrate all the way to the southern tip.
Pretty sure that's another theory.
Well,
but I just want to like mention as a reminder, this whole like radiocarbon dating thing is like, we rely on it a lot with stories like this, but it's not necessary. It's not the end all be all.
Well, and here's another wrench to throw in the works when it comes to using radiocarbon dating. There's a place that's called the Topper. It's an archaeological site that's it's on the Savannah River near Allendale, South Carolina. And there's an archaeologist. His name is Dr. Albert Goodyear.
Yeah, it is.
I don't believe he's related to the tire company. But he found charcoal material that is supposedly in relation to human artifacts, and that that material was dated at 50,000 years before the present.
I just that to me is like rocks, right?
Charcoal is like, it's created by burning wood, so God knows, it could have, maybe people burned a campfire there, or maybe there was just a forest fire. It's hard to say.
And that's what a lot of people say, and that's why this his claim isn't really considered valid.
Yeah.
He does live in South Carolina. No offense to all of our South Carolina.
Yeah.
Well, let's bring it back to a little bit of a little bit in our area.
Okay.
This was 2002 and 2003 sites. I believe I'm saying that correct, which is fossilized feces.
Yeah.
It was found, along with hunting tools, it was found in Paisley Caves, which is in southern central Oregon, which is kind of a desert region, found in those caves, and it was dated to be as much as 1,200 years before the Clovis should have even been in or on this continent. So again, there's problems with this, and I bring the Clovis first because they follow directly in line with the land bridge theory.
Sure.
Go ahead.
No, let's just go ahead and go through some of this other stuff.
Okay.
We're going to talk about the fast migration now, aren't we?
Well, we're going to talk about other migrations.
Yeah.
Here's our next one, which is, it's called Pacific Coastal Models.
Okay.
Okay, so there's a lot of words on this page, but let me just go ahead and see if I can sum this up in simple language, because this is a lot of science talk. Basically, what this theory says is that during the recession of the glaciers, people actually knew how to make boats of some kind, and they used those boats to travel down the coastlines of the continent. So they didn't go necessarily across the land bridge, but maybe they skirted it in boats, hunting and getting any vegetation that they could eat, and then they would be able to make their way down. That would make it much faster because you're always heading south.
Yeah, and the thing about it is that it gets you around obstructions and things like that. It's not all solid.
You don't have to climb a mountain.
Yeah.
You can just float around it.
Yeah.
You've got access to, let's say, sea turtles, and then there's reeds on the banks, and then you hunt a couple of deer or mastodon or whatever there.
No saber-toothed tigers to take you out in the process.
Exactly. Well, yeah.
Might be.
Yeah, you're floating on the water. And everybody, saber-toothed tiger, boat, go, go.
But of course, and they could have had dugouts. They could have had like boats made out of skins or whatever. And the nice thing about skirting the coast is it's just like nice and direct. When heavy weather sets in, you can just
go on land,
hightail it to the shore, and pull your boats up on
exactly.
And so that's
and that explains. This whole thing helps explain how these people could have made it so far south so fast.
Yeah.
Which is really kind of one of the issues with the Clovis theory. And again, they're able to use the ecosystems that are both marine and land-based. And it also, explains how they got so far south from the Bering Strait to what would be places like we talked about a little bit, which is Monteverde, which is in southern Chile. And there's another location which is in western Venezuela, which I believe is Taima. I might be incorrectly pronouncing that. But both of those places have stuff that's there that's been dated, as we said before, at about 14,000 years before the present. And this is stuff that's like the remains of seaweed that was collected from out in the water, and then there's human habitation remains. There's evidently another layer there that has been dated at 33,000 years ago. Now, that 33,000 years bit, that hasn't been widely accepted, but somebody has put that out.
Yeah.
But again, I got to bring it up because it makes you wonder if they could have come earlier, because as Joe said at the beginning, the glaciers didn't just expand and sit, they expanded and they contracted back and forth, so it could have been exposing bits of land to let people get down and make their landing in the pond. And there's a guy from, is it the University of Oregon or Oregon State?
Better get it right.
Well, the problem is I don't remember which one. His name is John Erlandson. Thank you, Joe. And he described it as the kelp highway hypothesis. And the short version of that is that there's kelp on the coast, and then as the Bering Strait becomes available, kelp is able to grow there. And these people are using kelp because that's a habitat that, if you look at kelp today, fish, things like otters and seals live in it, so we've got the prehistory version of those in them.
Well, kelp is edible in itself.
Yeah, so there's all this food material for people to get through. And once they had made it into the, I believe the phrase is deglaciated areas of British Columbia and the Americas, they could then just hightail it south. And he actually says that may have happened somewhere around 16,000 years ago. Now, there's some stuff about why people don't like this theory, and this actually falls into a couple of other theories that we're going to go into, but I just want to briefly touch on it. People don't buy into these theories because what is the one thing that we have not found? Boats.
Yeah.
We haven't found a single boat.
Yeah.
Okay, well, there's two reasons for that in my mind. Is either one, they're boats that are made out of hide.
In which case they've long since disintegrated.
They've long since disintegrated.
Yeah.
Or if they are wooden boats and they fell apart after use at sea or on the banks, we need to remember that when the ice receded, the sea levels rose a couple of hundred meters, anywhere from 100 to 200 meters. So now we're looking at sites that were coastal sites that are several hundred feet underwater.
And it'd be so cool, I think, to actually map the sea bottom. You could actually probably trace, roughly where the coastline was way back then. Yeah, and then just send down powerful machines to just rip everything out of the seafloor and see what you get.
That sounds responsible. That's a great idea, Joe.
Yeah, no, actually, we'll talk about this later, of course. There is one powerful machine that does just that. And it brought up some archaeological evidence.
Oh yeah, no, we're going to talk about that.
That's called a tease.
You are nothing but a tease this episode.
I know.
I've noticed he just keeps dropping things like that.
I was gonna just say that culture for a while, right? And you make land and you're like, all right, we're moving inland. This looks like a great place. We're gonna stay here. What do? You take the boat and you use it.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
Yeah, you can take it apart.
We haven't found a boat, like one single canoe or whatever it was. That doesn't mean that they didn't exist, because if you've got a really well tanned hide that's survived for a really long time, super waterproof, you're not gonna just leave it. You're gonna take it with you.
Well, the other thing about it is too is if you decide to go inland and you decide to just abandon your boat, what happens at the ocean and seacoast is that things deteriorate more rapidly than they do inland.
Well, let's also take a look at wooden boats, and I mean by full-on wooden-hulled boats that have sunk, that we have found hundreds of years later.
Yeah, they're not great.
They're barely there sometimes. Yeah. Even in the best of cases, it's not perfectly there. Now we're talking about thousands of years. So no wonder that we can't find that record.
Yeah, so I'm not bothered by the fact that we haven't found boats.
No. Absolutely. So we've got kind of a related theory here.
Okay.
And it's, I believe the way it's titled from all the research that I did is it's the Paleo-Indians of the coast from the Asias. Okay, so and this is another boat theory. Okay, this says that people from the coastline of the Kuril Islands, I believe I'm pronouncing that right. Again, this is full of words I don't know, but these islands are on Southeast Asia and Japan, and then they extend north across the Asian continent, and eventually, if that Bering Strait happened to be exposed, they would then run all the way into Alaska and down to the coast. So they were basically, again, skirting that area. That
kind of actually is sort of an extension of the previous theory.
It really is. The thing about this is, and Joe, I don't know if you can pronounce this better than I, is it the Haida or Haida Nation?
I have no idea. I'm gonna go with Haida.
Haida Nation.
That's a coin flip, though.
Yeah, it is a coin flip for us, unfortunately. These are the peoples of the Queen Charlotte Islands, which are in British Columbia, and they believe that they may have originated from Asian mariner cultures. And they have said that they believe they may have been there from anywhere from 25 to 12,000 years ago, which, if you look at some of their navigation, and if it's that long ago, that would explain why we see human habitation in places in South America. We've got a place called Picamachai Cave. Picamachai, I'm going to go with, which is in Peru. And then again, Monteverde. And Picamachai, I don't know why I said that a third time, but evidently that's supposedly 20,000 years ago. So, I mean, it's quite possible that they just, as we said before, we're just skirting the coast and heading south. And again, I think we talked about this a little bit, but I just can't see people walking that far in groups over the course of 1,000 years. It just seems really far to people living their life on the go to have made it through all that territory.
In 1,000 years? I don't know. 1,000 years is a long time. Most people are not going to keep walking. They're going to find a